Hey, welcome back to Sound Faith Consulting. I'm the president of Sound Faith Consulting, Tyson James, here with another interesting interview for you. Before I bring on my guest, I want to give you guys the opportunity to participate in what we do. Sound Faith has just launched our brand new Patreon page. So the funds that will be raised through this Patreon page are going towards building up the future leaders in Christian philosophy, theology, and apologetics. We have tons of awesome projects that we outlined there on the Patreon page. The link is in the description, so check that out. If you appreciate what we do and want to be part of the future of these fields, please consider supporting us. We would greatly appreciate it. So today, I'm super excited to bring on my friend, Lindsey Medenwaldt, whose brand new book, Bridge Building Apologetics, just hit the markets. It's a fantastic book, and I'm so happy to have her with us. So let me bring her on. Lindsey,
hey.
Welcome.
So good to see you, Tyson.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. I'm so excited about this book, and it's a phenomenal contribution to the apologetics books out there. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from it, so I'm super excited to have you on to talk about it. Before we get into that, what's your earliest memory?
Yeah, so I'm older. Having an early memory is difficult, but I seem to remember spending some time watching professional wrestling when I was a child. And one of my earliest one of my earliest memories is in the basement in a house in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, betting with a family friend with pennies and nickels on who was going to win the wrestling match on Saturday mornings. I vividly remember this. So that I think is one of my, which is so odd, right? It's a very odd first memory.
And how old were you, did you say?
I don't know, like it had to have been before 5. So sometime around that age.
Okay, so betting, I live in Las Vegas, so
you do. Yeah, I'm not saying everybody should go and bet on professional wrestling. I'm just saying that's what I did.
Now, how good were you? Were you like picking winners, or was it like hitting?
No, I picked whoever had the coolest costume or the neatest music, usually Hulk Hogan. This was not like a strategy. No.
It's a winning strategy for sure. Awesome. Well, we have been friends for a while. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first time we met was at an apologetics conference in Denver. Is that right?
It sounds right. We do so much interaction online. It's hard to tell when we've met in person. Denver was a big one, so I would put money on that.
Yeah, and I kind of remember we went out to eat, you and the family, and I was just there by myself, and I think we went out to eat afterwards, and it was fantastic. Of course, I know your husband, Jay. He used to be a chapter director for Reasonable Faith, good friend. So yeah, we've been connected for a long time. So I'm just so happy now to be able to interview you in a professional circumstance. So
it's crazy, full circle, how that works.
Yeah, well, I have really, truly enjoyed watching you develop in the field of apologetics into your own, and just being able to have the platform that you have. So I'm super excited to introduce you to our viewers as well.
Thanks.
Awesome. So let's dive into the book. First, the book is fantastic. I love the cover. It's very colorful, very
Thank you for saying that. I love the cover too.
Yeah, it's just a very attractive cover. Did you have any input on that, or was it the publisher that mainly was like,
you're stuck with it? No. So my publisher, Harvest House, actually sends, well, I don't know if they do it for everybody, but they sent me a document and said, what is your dream of how this book will look? And I said, I just know that I want a hand-drawn bridge. Whatever it looks like, I want a hand-drawn bridge. And this is I'm going to show it. This is what they delivered, was the hand-drawn bridge. And I was just so ecstatic the first time I saw it. And then they added the fonts, and we talked about color, because which audience am I reaching, who likes what colors. And this was the result. I also mentioned that if you look really closely at it, you'll see it's got dots. It's sort of a dotty kind of cover. Yeah, I specifically requested that, and they did that for me. So I'm very grateful that they took the time to listen and cared what I thought. And the response has been overwhelmingly people love it. So thank you for bringing that up. I love the company.
Yeah. Well, kudos to Harvest House. It sounds like they were really responsive to your vision for it. So, with some large publishers, that can be difficult. They want what they want, and you kind of have to go with it. So that's really cool for Harvest House and for you seeing the vision come to life.
Yep, I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed that process a lot. It's been kind of weird to be in that process. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. But the cover was a really fun part of the process.
Very cool. Well, I have to admit, I would have shown my copy, but I just put it in the mail a couple days ago because I got it for a giveaway, because we're doing giveaways every week this year. And so somebody had won the copy, and so I sent it out. So I didn't have another copy on hand. So
that's okay. No problem. I can send you another one.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's start with the foreword, written by Hillary Morgan Ferrer. Again, a close friend of ours. You've worked with her professionally for a while now. So just talk about your relationship with Hillary and how did that start? And, she wrote a fantastic foreword. So yeah, just talk about her a little bit.
Yeah, our relationship was, I think, truly a divine appointment. I was going to seminary at Denver Seminary in Denver, well, Littleton actually, and there were no other women in my program. I was really desperate to meet other women who were interested in apologetics. Not that I don't, like interacting with men who are interested in apologetics, but I really wanted to interact with women. And it just so happened that Biola was hosting Women in Apologetics' first women's event. It was all for women who were interested in apologetics. And I said, oh, I got to go to that. So I hopped on a plane and went to LA and started learning from various apologists. Natasha Crane was there. Lisa Childers was there. I think she was leading worship for that event. Mary Jo Sharp spoke at that event. And then Hillary was a speaker at that event. I didn't really know of Hillary. I didn't even really know of Mama Bear at that point, but she was sort of frantic. I hate to say that. She knows I tell this story all the time, but she seemed really stressed out, and I didn't know who she was, but I was like, hey, you seem like something's wrong. I'm a random person. You're a random person. How can I pray for you? And she said, I'm about to speak and my tech is broken. And I said, oh, well, I'll go away and I'll pray. And then I'll come back. And so I left and I prayed in like a classroom at Biola, and came back and her tech was working. It wasn't perfect, but her tech was working. And at the end of it, I went up and spoke with her, and it led to a conversation about what I'm interested in. And by April, so this was in January, by April, I had started my own series on the Mama Bear blog talking about world religion. So it's really just been a really fun ride. That was 2018, I think. So we've been together since that time, and it's been quite fun. Wow. Maybe 2017 even. No, maybe it was 2017.
That's pretty cool. Bonding and building friendship over tech problems.
Yes. Anybody who speaks knows that this is the way.
That's awesome. So she wrote a great foreword, and she's been, again, another one of you women in apologetics who are just knocking it out of the park. So you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm so glad that you guys have been able to connect and really build off one another, and have that professional relationship too, making an impact in the apologetics world.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I'm so grateful that Hillary took the time to read the book and write the foreword, and she's been such a fierce advocate for me. So I'm just really appreciative for that. And I wrote the book while I was still working with Mama Bear, and still am working with Mama Bear. And so it's just been really fun to be able to talk with her about, what was it like writing the first book? What should I expect here? What does this look like? And she's sort of held my hand along the way to get me through some of the things. So it's been pleasurable to have her as a friend now, more than just a colleague, but truly someone I call a friend.
Awesome. Shout out to Hillary.
Shout out to Hillary.
Yeah. So speaking about your entry into apologetics and why it is that you're even writing a book on this subject, obviously at some point you had to make a decision to go into this field to study apologetics. Obviously, it's not taught in churches very much. So you mentioned in the book that your husband, Jay, really was influential in your learning apologetics. So can you talk about that journey a little bit, and maybe a little bit about your upbringing? You know, was it Christian? Was it non-Christian? And how did that affect your going into apologetics?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate that I was raised in a Christian home. I have Christian parents; they're still Christians. They are together still. I mean, I was raised in a very Christian home. My dad's a pastor. My parents were missionaries. We spent some time in different countries serving as long-term missionaries, and so definitely have that foundation in my life. Around 19, maybe 20. I had a professor in college challenge me. He was struck by the notion that I was still a Christian, and I was, 3 years into college at this point. Why haven't I changed? Was basically, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, let me do an independent study with you, and we can talk about the different world religions, and I can give them a fair look. And at the end of this adventure in this classroom, I will make a decision. I was pretty sure at that point that I was going to end up a Christian at the end of the line, but I didn't really know what it was called. Apologetics was nowhere on my radar as far as that goes. But I investigated the truth claims of other religions as a 20-year-old. So it was kind of a surface level investigation. I read some Christian books, and at the end of the semester, continued to follow Jesus. It was my decision. And that was good enough for the longest time. Flash forward about a year, I meet Jay, who was agnostic. His story is fantastic, the way that he came to Christ. He was agnostic at the time. A couple of years into our relationship, he was in the classroom and was challenged on his faith and became a Christian because of apologetics. I thought, well, that's great. I'm so glad that apologetics worked for you. I don't really need to know it. I'm going to support you. I'm going to try to muddle through it when you're talking about it. But it's not really for me. I don't need it. Then he was in the Air Force, and at one point he said, I think I would like to go to seminary. And I said, oh, okay. So this would be the point in a military life where you're deciding, do we go the extra 10 years or do we get out now, right? Are we going to retire or are we going to get out now? And it was, we're going to get out now. And I said, well, it looks like the seminary that you're looking at has a 50% discount for spouses. I wonder if they would let me in. And he said, I think they might let you in. And so I applied and I got in. I got into Denver Seminary. And the whole purpose of me going was so that I could have a deeper relationship with my husband and have the kind of conversations that were interesting to him. Not that I need to know everything that he knows. He knows a lot, or that he needs to know everything that I know. But this is like the core truth and the core of who we are as Christ followers. And it became really important to me. And seminary was truly transformative. Starting from the get-go, first class, challenged me. Why do you believe what you believe? I couldn't really give a great answer. At that point, I was just a sponge sucking everything in. I watched so many William Lane Craig debates. I mean, I would read. We went through Christian Apologetics by Doug Rotice, and I would read whatever the reading assignment was. And then I would watch the debates, or I would watch extra videos that were put out by other apologists on the topics. And then I would just, go to class and learn more. So I was really just trying to absorb it all. And it's just been a wonderful ride, because back then I would have never guessed that this is the path that God had me on. Never had a book on my radar. Really didn't think I would be in ministry. I guess you would count it mostly full time at this point. This was not something that I thought I would be doing. And yet here we are. God has his plans, and just trying to roll along with it.
Awesome. Incredible journey here. So looking forward to seeing it continue. Now, one thing that was really interesting, and you only have like one sentence on this in the book, but you mention in the book that you don't really enjoy debating with people.
Oh, no.
And you say, even though you used to be an attorney. So you used to be an attorney, and that was like, that's the all you said about that. But that was like, that was really interesting to me. So I'm wondering, did your background in law or working as an attorney have any effect on how you approached faith, or, you know, subsequently, you know, how you learned apologetics? Did that have any effect at all?
Well, you have to pass a logic section of the law school exam in order to get into law school. So that's part of it. Logic is a big part of apologetics. But for me, law school was a place where I learned how to interact with people who were different than I was. So not a lot of Christians at my law school, even though I did go to a Catholic law school. That doesn't mean all the students are a Christian. There was sort of a respectful classroom. We didn't have many arguments or fights in the classroom, but students definitely disagreed with one another outside of the classroom. And there were a couple of instances where I received some flack for my faith, but other instances where I was asked to pray for people because they knew that I was a Christian and they didn't know who else to ask. But law school really helped me understand that people have perspectives that are beyond whatever label they bear. So, for instance, after I graduated from law school, I practiced law for a few months, and then I had a baby. So I was out for a while. I was grading for law students who were preparing for the bar exam, but for the most part, I wasn't practicing law. And I was licensed in Colorado and Texas. So we moved to Colorado after law school, and I started volunteering with this organization that helped poorer people, I guess, get through life, either get them medical help. There was an on-staff nurse. There's me. I would provide some legal advice and help them kind of get through some things, whether it be landlord-tenant issues or bankruptcy or child support, whatever the thing was. And there was one particular person who struck me that I think is probably the most important client I've ever had. He was a homeless man who had come in and he was asking for a will. And I said, okay. He goes, but for me, I don't want to be thrown away in the trash. I want to be buried. So can I make a document where I won't be thrown away as garbage? I was like, yes. And so we drafted a document, and he wears it with him. And it's a document requesting that the court bury him, and they will. That this is something that courts do. And he won't be thrown away. But that moment for me was, okay, he is a homeless man who carries so many labels, right? Whatever labels we might put on him. And yet this desire to be known, even in death, is as far as like, I am an image bearer of God. Am I not also important enough to bury rather than just throw away with the night's trash? It was a moment for me where I realized, like, people matter. And I mean, I had already seen that in life, but I had never seen it quite that raw for me.
Wow. That is a jarring thing to be confronted with and to just encounter face to face.
Yeah, it makes you kind of forget that we want to be argumentative or that we want to debate, right? When we start to remember the people behind the lawyers, those stories that exist, those perspectives, those experiences, the fact that they are humans made in the image of God, whatever their beliefs might be, God still wants to call them his own. And recognizing that, along with Romans 12:18, which we strive to be at peace with all men, allows me to kind of use the skills that I've acquired in law school, but recognizing that there are people that we're supposed to be discipling and sharing the gospel with.
Yeah, So I was in the military back in the day, and before I did that, I worked in debt collections.
Mhm.
So, as you can imagine, there were a lot of tense conversations, and it could be a little adversarial at times. But
Right.
a lot of my coworkers, they would take the, stereotypical debt collector approach and really beat up on the customers and try and get as many of them to pay as possible by, making threats and things like that. And I took the opposite
Mhm.
approach. I looked at them as people who are in distress and they need options. They need a way to get out from under, the debt that they have. And so I really tried to approach it that way with a lot of compassion and just being able to, or attempting to inform people of options that they just didn't know they had, with the intent of helping them.
Mhm.
And I was consistently one of the top performers in my region, really. And so I think you're kind of touching on that. Whatever profession you're in, really, I think we as Christians are called to be set apart and have an attitude that reflects the love that we should have, that Christ had for us, with
Mhm.
everyone. So that
Right.
really affects how we approach things. So very,
That's
very
not
cool.
to say, though, Tyson, that I don't love a good William Lane Craig debate, right? Like, there are people who should enter the debate sphere, and he is one of them. He is perfectly capable of doing that, with the gentleness and respect aspect attached, right?
Right.
So I think there's a time and a place for a debate.
Yeah.
But in general, most of us, it's not what we're called to do.
Yeah, it takes a certain personality to do it
It
well.
does.
For sure. All right. Well, moving along, one of our esteemed clients, Dr. Douglas Groothuis, he was one of the people that endorsed your book. And you mentioned that he was one of your professors, one of your mentors at Denver Seminary, which I believe he's now at Cornerstone University in Michigan. But what was your experience like going through that program and studying under him, and what kind of impact did he have on you?
Yeah, I was fortunate to have several great professors at seminary, including Dr. Groothuis. And I wasn't sure what to expect with him, if I'm being honest. He called himself the curmudgeon, and that doesn't carry like super positive connotations with it. But if you meet him and you speak with him in person or even online face to face like this, his attitude is so gracious and kind, and he really does carry a gentle spirit with him, where you want to have conversations. And that's how he managed his classroom as well. He taught my intro class. I also had Gary DeWeese, who came in from Biola for part of the semester to teach. And that was amazing for a first semester, right? But then the next semester, I had Craig Blomberg, who is a New Testament scholar and into apologetics as well. And that has been, getting to know him and his wife, Dr. Fran, has just been, wonderful. So like I said, been really fortunate to have professors help me through seminary and my freakouts. I had lots of those freakouts in seminary, but they, mentored me and guided me through. This is how you should be thinking about these things, or have you thought about that? Helping me navigate really a world that I hadn't encountered, even though I grew up as a Christian. We were talking philosophy, right? Sarah Geis, bless her heart, had to teach me ethics, and I'm like, these things are just not sticking in my brain, Sarah. I just can't get them to grasp and stick. So it was a lot of like repetition with them. Please, can you help me walk through that argument? But in the end, did okay, did really well, and it graduated. I got the degree, which is great, and I learned a lot. I walked away with a lot of information in my brain, but I also walked away with people that I know I can call and ask for help. Like, I talked to Dr. Groothuis pretty regularly about things, and Craig Blomberg is always available, and Sarah Geis is always available. It's just been really nice to have that relationship with people who have done such great scholarly work in the field of apologetics or in other fields that they're experts in, like for Sarah, philosophy, or Craig for New Testament.
Yeah, mentors are just so important. It was difficult for me growing up in the church because it didn't feel like I had many mentors. And so when I started getting into apologetics, it was really just like I had found mentors through the books of these philosophers and theologians. And once I finally did get to enter the Master's in Apologetics at Biola, it just took it to a whole other level. You realize the love and compassion behind the scholarship. And yeah.
It's so funny, Tyson, that you mentioned the books, because that one of the first books that I read when I was 19, when I was telling you that story about college, was So What's the Difference by Fritz Ridenour. And both Doug Groothuis and Craig Blomberg are mentioned in the biography, like in the biographical stuff, where, you know, extra resources. If you'd like to read more about these topics, you should read these books. And both Doug and Craig are in there. This is just crazy how God works so meticulously in our lives, and very, very interesting stuff, knowing that I had been exposed to some of their work so young, and yet didn't meet them until I was well into my 30s.
Yeah. Super cool. Well, let's talk more about the book. Another thing I really like about the book, besides the cover, is the layout. A lot of people don't understand like how important a layout is, right? It can really affect the way that you consume the material and the attractiveness, the flow of everything. Your book has a fantastic layout. You've got, you know, the main body of the chapters. You start each chapter with, you know, a fantastic quote, which is always great. And then at the end of each chapter, you include questions for reflection and discussion. So this book is fantastic for small groups, for schools, classrooms, all that. And even families, right? Having discussions about this between family members. I can foresee people using it that way for sure. And then you also include a list of recommendations of additional resources. So you really put in the work to create this beautiful resource that has a lot of good formatting, good extra resources, good discussion questions. So what was the thought process behind the layout? Did you have some help with that, or was this sort of it, you know, it really came to you as this is how the book should be?
Yeah, this was kind of how I imagined it would be when I was dreaming it up. The only thing I didn't get was footnotes. I have 20 or more pages of endnotes. So there's even more resources in the endnotes, but they don't do footnotes at Harvest House. So it's endnotes. I apologize that it's, you know, I pushed and that's not something I won, but I won everything else. So I will take the endnotes. And like I said, there are more than 20 pages that they allowed me to include endnotes on. So definitely lots of reading can be done, or I include videos or other references too. But for me, it's important when we're learning things or learning new material to be able to put them into practice and apply them. The questions are meant to help start that process, to help make the topic more personal. Because I do share some personal stories. Obviously we talk about scripture a lot, but then I try to have the reader or listener relate to it by answering the questions. And then as far as the resources, one thing people will notice that is a little bit different is that not all of my resources are necessarily Christian or resources that I would agree 100% with. So like, for example, there's a whole chapter on bridges, like the bridges that get built where cars go across. The engineering books that I refer or recommend are not Christian texts. Okay, so I didn't go and find like which Christian engineers can I talk about in this book. No, it was who are the best in their field, who can I cite, and I kind of had that process for every reference section in my book. And I recognize that for some Christians that might be a little bit challenging, but my response to that is I think we can learn from people even if they're not Christians. There are definitely non-theists who are teaching some wonderful things about a variety of topics that if we were to only learn from Christians, we would be missing some things. And so part of the book is to challenge people in their resources to start to build bridges in that way, by stepping kind of outside of that Christian circle of resources, which is great to have, and see if there are some resources from the other side that might help bring some more perspective into our worldview.
Yeah, that is such a great point. I would even add, like, growing up in Protestant evangelical, I grew up in Arkansas, it was all Southern Baptist churches, and you have like, a core group of authors that you read besides, scripture, and that's it. Everything else is just kind of dead to you. And, there's no discussion of the incredible intellectual tradition from Catholicism or the Orthodox churches or any other school of thought besides what that particular church or convention draws from. And so I think we're really impoverished that way, right? These people, there are some people throughout history in the church, maybe they're not evangelicals, maybe they're part of a different tradition, but they've spent an incredible amount of time and mental energy thinking about these really difficult theological and philosophical questions, and we can gain insight from them. And we do ourselves a disservice by just tossing the baby out with the bathwater if we disagree with some theological points. So I love that you focus on that you include non-Christian sources, because we can learn from people who are experts in their field, no matter what their religious persuasion.
Yeah, I think that was something that was really important to me in writing this book, and the publisher allowed me to do that. But I do have like a disclaimer. There's a disclaimer. Did you see the disclaimer? There's a disclaimer that the publisher was like, I think we should have a disclaimer. I said, okay, we could do it. We could do that as long as I can, cite to other sources. I would love to have a disclaimer. So I reference non-Christians in the text as well. There are non-Christian organizations that I refer to that I think are doing great jobs at building bridges with other people. And just know that there is a little note about that at the beginning to warn you. And then all of the references as well, like they're not going to all be Christian. And I think we can still learn from them.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love it. All right. Moving along. So I have to point this out before we get any further. Several times in the book, you use a very interesting phrase. You say, "Don't be a jerk for Jesus."
I say a naughty word.
it's even italicized in a couple of places, like very, foot stomp, like pay attention to this. So can you just explain a little bit for the viewers why you emphasize that phrase in the book?
Yeah, mainly for our social media crowd, right? That's really the big one. I mean, I was just on social media about an hour ago and ran across a post where some Christians were just name calling other people, and they were kind of falling into this trap of back and forth, and they had a righteous hill to die on. It was a good hill, but the way that they were doing it was, of course, it's not going to go anywhere, because you could have the most righteous hill, but if you're mean or mean-spirited or unkind or using ad hominem or personal attacks, that's going to shut a person down faster than if you were to say, ask questions or see them as image bearers, for example. I don't think it takes much of a leap or a stretch for people to know what I'm talking about. We see it every day on social media. And even if you're not on social media, but you're watching the media, you're going to see it in the news. People not disagreeing well with each other. And they could have the best purpose, Tyson. They could have, but I'm doing this for the gospel message. Yeah, but is that what we're called to do? Did Jesus say, go be a jerk? No. And, we could get the pushback with, well, sometimes he was very firm with people. Yes, he was very, very firm with religious leaders and people who were teaching falsehood. But on the whole, Jesus's approach was gentle and loving, not jerky. I don't even know if that's a word, but he wasn't a jerk. And we shouldn't be a jerk either, especially if we're supposed to be patterning our character after Jesus. That's not his character. And I don't know if he was standing right next to us if we would behave in that manner or if we would write in that way, because we know, I think, intuitively that we probably shouldn't be behaving that way, even if the argument is sound.
There's definitely, like you said, a time and a place for tough love, which is what Jesus, was demonstrating when he had very harsh words for the religious leaders. Their hearts were hardened. He's trying to break through to them, and sometimes the only way is to have very harsh words. But you're absolutely right, though, that for the most part, that's not the way he operated. And definitely when you're practicing apologetics in today's culture, especially, as soon as you start throwing around like insults and things like that, you're shutting down the conversation, right? People don't want to hear what you have to say. You kind of have to win that credit, that rapport in the conversation in order to be heard and for the gospel to be heard. And so
it's a confirmation bias for them too, because they already have this idea of Christians are just going to yell at you or they're just going to be mean to you. And now you're confirming that with them. Jay's going to be so proud of me for throwing out that term, by the way, because it's a psychological term, right? But this idea of like, we want to go past that expectation and show them that Christians can actually behave well. We can be gentle and respectful, even if we're disagreeing. And maybe even especially if we're disagreeing, we show ourselves to be set apart. Because if we don't, that's just one more notch, right? Against Christianity. And for the next person, for the next Christian who enters that person's life, it's going to be that much more difficult to overcome. And so we want to be as gracious as possible so that we're laying seeds and not weeds, because weeds are really, really tough to pull and get out, and their roots are very, very deep. We want to lay seeds so that fruit actually comes to fruition, right? We can actually see the fruit of our labors and the people before us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lindsey, in chapter 8 of your book,
truth.
on truth as a foundation for bridge building, you talk about the difference between objective and subjective truth, which is fantastic. We need more of that. Like every book should have something about that in there now. And then you go into several very interesting areas of popular culture. So namely, you talk about New Age, you talk about conspiracy theories, and you talk about AI. Yeah. Which are, all of those are like buzzwords. So I was very, those jumped out at me. So first of all, let's just take a couple of them. So for New Age, why did you include New Age in the book? Like, to me, that's something that was a bygone era. There were apologists like Dr. Groheis who did a lot of work on that and kind of faded to the background. So why talk about it? Is it becoming a big thing again, or what's going on?
Yeah, Groheis wrote this great book called Unmasking the New Age. He's written actually several books on the New Age, but that was like, I think it was the late 70s or early 80s that he wrote those books. And if I get that wrong, I'm sorry, but I think that's about right. And then there have been other people, who have written about it in the past. Well, it's not in the past. It is currently happening, especially with social media like TikTok. We start to see the New Age kind of come back again. We see it ebb and flow with feminism, actually, when you're looking at feminist rights. It seems like the New Age starts to make a go again. So we kind of saw like that in the 70s and 60s and in the 80s, and then now we're seeing it again. And with that, we're having to confront some falsehoods that are part of New Age thinking, including reincarnation, the belief in karma. And somebody once said, well, who cares about karma? And I said, well, Taylor Swift just had a song called Karma. Like this is what kids are singing when they're singing Taylor Swift songs, and they need to know what they're singing about. I think Jojo Siwa just had a song called Karma. And so, this is the stuff that kids are learning through music. And these are kids. I mean, Taylor Swift's not a kid, but she's much younger than I am. Singing about karma, and Jojo Siwa is much younger than Taylor Swift, singing about karma. And so these are things that are coming back again. These ideas of karma and reincarnation, which are of course unbiblical and anti-scriptural. The other aspect of New Age is crystals. There is like a major resurgence of the use of crystals to help with healing or in prayer, and the science isn't there. Like it just doesn't. The science doesn't work in crystals. But New Agers believe in the power of crystals and have added that to their practice. And you're like, well, okay, well, that's good for New Agers. But the thing is, Christians are starting to buy into this. We just have to look at some of the latest Pew research, or even George Barna has talked about this, where there are people who call themselves Christians who subscribe to reincarnation and really believe they're going to come back again, reincarnated. And they believe in karma. They believe in getting their astrological sign read and then going to psychics and tarot cards. And these are Christians. And so what's happened, Tyson, is that we've forgotten the core truth because we're not reading the Bible. We're not getting truth because we're not reading scripture, and truth is found in the Word of God. And we're not putting on the full armor of God because that's got the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Like these are things that we're not equipping ourselves with. So when we are confronted with falsehood, like New Age ideas, lo and behold, we incorporate them into our belief system. And that's not really how it should function. But that's what we're seeing.
Gotcha. Wow, that's interesting. All right. So yeah, if you've got kids on TikTok, they're probably being exposed to New Age ideology then. So pick up this book so that you can prepare yourself to have those conversations and push back against falsehoods. So excellent. So another one of those topics was AI. My company put out an article not too long ago, a blog on different benefits that churches can derive from using AI. And as soon as we put that out, I was not expecting an avalanche of comments on this, but we had people literally saying that AI is bringing the devil into the church, that it's demonic, that it's evil. Just flat out, you just don't use it, it's evil. And I thought that was really interesting, like that the knee-jerk reaction there. So in the book, you mentioned that you teach a lesson about generative AI in one of your writing courses. So what are some of the main issues with generative AI and AI in general, and how can we as Christians be responsible in our use of AI?
Yeah, I think it's new, so we don't have all the answers. We're sort of all jumping the gun, right? We have all these expectations for it. We're going to be able to achieve so much, and then we realize, oh wait, maybe we can't achieve it that quickly. And then also the fear factor. I've also heard those arguments, Tyson, about it's of the devil. I've actually heard that demons are the ones controlling AI. So it's not a computer, it's a demon. And that's a conspiracy theory. I have thoughts. They don't matter at this point, but that's a theological question. But as far as writing goes and teaching my students how to use AI, the fear of professors worldwide is that their students are simply going to type in a question to AI and then submit that answer. And it certainly does happen. that way. We've definitely gotten essays back from students who thought that they could get away with it. But we've got AI checkers. They're not perfect, but they work okay, because what happens is AI is polling from certain places and gives similar feedback if you ask certain questions. And the essays start to look like, oh, that's not human. There will be weird mistakes. Citations don't happen in AI. They'll make up sources in AI. Different locations will be wrong. So teaching my students that they can't trust AI right now because it's not perfect, it's not fail-safe, and you could very well be submitting an essay that's completely false if you're not careful. So one of the ways that I tell my students to use AI is to ask it questions. So you start with the original question and then follow up and keep asking questions. And then you can end up with something that will help you as a stepping stone in your writing, as creative ideas, but not to replace you, because we can tell. There are some books on Amazon that have been written by AI, and I went down a rabbit hole one day and sort of read the reviews, and it's just, you can tell, right? Like you could tell, and you might get away with it for a little while, but eventually we're going to spot it. But I know that there are theological issues that people are concerned about, and I don't have an answer for those concerns. I have found AI to be helpful when I'm trying to nail down a creative idea or get an idea so that I can spark something and actually get over a writing, where I can't, a writer's block. It'll help me with that. But using AI to write is a very bad idea. Future writing students, don't do that.
Yeah. One thing that we use it for all the time, and it's not, not generative AI, but just using AI to add subtitles, attractive looking subtitles.
So helpful.
Oh my goodness.
Not everybody can write headlines.
Yeah. I mean, that's just such a helpful tool, and it takes, literally seconds for, it to generate the transcript basically from the audio of your video and then put subtitles on, and it dramatically increases the number of views you get on social media, because a lot of people, they're scrolling their phones, they don't have their volume up because there's some place where their phone can't be loud or whatever, and so they'll be able to read what you're saying. Such a helpful tool in that regard. So yeah, I mean, we incorporate a lot of AI in what we do at Sound Faith, but really in a responsible way that never ever takes out the human element. So I totally agree with you there. Good. So that was chapter 8. Chapter 9, you give really practical advice on actually building friendships, which I think is one of the keys to this book. It's like you're talking about bridge building apologetics. And if we're not seeking to build friendships, that's one, we're not going to be building many bridges at all. So one piece of advice that you give is for us to get out of our echo chambers. And you kind of already do this in the book by, having non-Christian sources in the bibliography, but you advise people, like take a step out of your echo chamber, that circle of people that you're like-minded, that you're all on the same page, step out of that area. And for a lot of people, that seems really counterintuitive, right? When you're talking about building bridges, like those are the bridges that have been built, like you've got those friends. And so why should people step out of their echo chamber if they want to build bridges in apologetics?
Yeah, it makes for a richer friendship circle, for one. It's pretty neat to be able to have people who have different worldviews around your table at dinner, right? And invite your neighbors in, even if they're not Christ followers. Now that's just at a basic level. It makes things interesting. Now, it could make things really interesting, especially as we have a U.S. election, presidential election coming up. But the thing about an echo chamber is that you're not really strengthening your arguments. You're stuck with the people who all believe the same thing, which is great, especially because we're supposed to be with a community of like-minded believers. That's good for us spiritually and emotionally. But how are we going to get better at that, defending the faith, if we don't know what the other side is saying? And we're not going to know what the other side is saying just based on what the media might tell us, or what we might glimpse on social media, or what we might read on a lawn sign. Instead, it's in relationship where we begin to see the differences that we might have, and we can have those gentle conversations where there's lots of questions being asked and there's a lot of listening well. That those two things are really important when we're pursuing genuine friendships, is we have to be willing to ask questions, not just to respond or give an answer, but to understand a perspective, right? We want to learn. And then the other piece is we need to be able to listen well. We won't be able to learn if we're not listening well. So listen to understand. Listen to get to know the person on a deeper level. Friendship is vital for human flourishing. Science says so. And I think scripture illustrates that as well. And for us to be without friends, we shouldn't do that. But I'm challenging everybody to maybe have friends who aren't Christians, and begin to ask them questions. What do you believe? Or have them ask you questions about your beliefs. And you can kind of challenge each other in that loving friendship kind of way, and say, okay, well, I have atheist friends, for example, and we can, go back and forth on, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And it's not mean-spirited. We're not trying to destroy them. We're just seeking to understand. And I think we can do that best in the idea of friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with the Faithiest Atheist?
Yeah, he actually endorsed my book after it came out.
Yeah. That's right. He was saying that.
Yeah.
Because I was on a live stream with him and Bill Scott yesterday.
Saw that. Yep.
Yeah. He's such a cool guy. But it's great having him as a friend and somebody who actually understands us. Like he's a bridge builder himself. He has intentionally sought out conversations with Christian apologists, Christian philosophers, and really listens to people very well, tries to understand the positions and have substantive conversations. And just love having him as a friend.
Another one that I found that I've really loved interacting with online is potential theism. I won't out his name because he doesn't normally give his name online, but he's one that I've also gotten to know over the last few years through Twitter or X, and it's been really nice. And he's actually endorsed the book too. He made a whole video about it for his YouTube channel because I think we need to be able to lift each other up and support each other. That's what friends do, right? We celebrate each other. And, those two in particular have been really helpful for me as a new Christian apologist, sort of coming into this and saying, well, can't I be friends with other people? And the answer is yes, I can. I can have genuine, caring relationships with other people, even if we disagree on the biggest thing of all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so moving on to a different topic here. In a conference talk I did recently, I was defending the exclusivity of Christianity. And in that talk, I called Christian particularism, which is this idea that, Christianity makes exclusive truth claims, like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the only way to the Father, right? Very exclusive. Like if you don't have Christ, then you're, on the wrong path. And I call it one of the most offensive Christian doctrines, especially in today's culture, because it's so pluralistic, right? There are so many people that say, oh, there are many valid paths to God that don't have anything to do with Jesus, or some people that say all paths are valid. So you deal with some of that in the book. You deal with pluralism and exclusivity, but from a very practical angle, which is what I love. And really, the whole book is super practical. I mean, people wanting an apologetics book that you can immediately apply to your life, like this book is gold for that. So, in a nutshell, though, what's your advice for dealing with religious pluralism? Because people are definitely going to be encountering this, especially if they're on social media. How do we combat this idea that there are many valid paths or that they're all valid?
Well, they can't be, right? Like, even if we're just thinking logically, they can't all be correct. In a sense, like, if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, then everything else falls away, because none of the other worldviews teach that. There might be some choose your own adventure kind of religions where they believe that, but for the most part, Christianity, that we're the only ones really who have a God who sacrificed himself so that we could be saved. Like that, like this is, this is practical. They can't all be right. If Hindus believe in millions of gods and we believe in one, they can't both be right. And so we have to be able to say, just on a practical level, that, if one is true, the other cannot be true. If there is only one God, then Hinduism's view of millions of gods just simply can't be true. And vice versa. If there are millions of gods, there's obviously the one God, but it doesn't work. The Hindu idea of the godship doesn't work for Christianity either. You can't be both Hindu and Christian. And so I think this is where truth really comes in. It's so important, because we have to be able to stand firm on biblical truth as Christians. But we see it, in other topics as well, in other subject areas in the news that I won't mention by name, but so many things where you're like, but that doesn't make sense. So sometimes we just have to look at things on a simple level and say, does it even work? And it doesn't. Now, it's really interesting to study different worldviews and different religions. And I encourage people to do that, because there are a lot of views out there about religion. But I also encourage you to look at their truth claims and to determine if they're valid. What does history say? What does archaeology say? Does it make sense? And so I may not have just all said that in the book, but for me, that's the most practical way of dealing with it, is to say, okay, you say that my truth is true and your truth is true, but you believe that A equals A or A equals B, and I believe that A equals A. We can't both be right. So which is it? We need to have a conversation and talk about this, because it doesn't work. And it's one that our culture is struggling with, because I think we've made too many allowances for falsehood, and now we're having to pay the piper, because when do we nail it down? No, that's dumb. That's not true. And we need to really be able to say that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of something Dr. Craig said. He was talking about the laws of logic, and he said, there was one guy who suggested that the reason that God gave the Israelites so many laws to follow was largely to teach them the law of non-contradiction, right? Do this because it's not that, right? Do this, don't do that,
yes.
Right? Over and over and over again. Get it through your head that there's, the law of non-contradiction. I was like, that is hilarious. If that was actually one of God's intentions, that's pretty funny.
We will find out one day.
Yeah. That might be why the Judeo-Christian tradition really focuses on rationality and the logic of it. Yeah, cool. You mentioned earlier the elections coming up.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so let's get political for a second. I do think it's a great time to talk about bridge building in the context of politics because of the elections coming up. And you do touch on that in your book. So it seems sometimes like there just isn't a way to have a productive conversation across ideological lines, much less build friendships, right? It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, with some people. So what can we do to break down those barriers, especially in a political context?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. Some people are more gifted in that area than others, where they can have those kinds of political conversations without losing their cool. Because politics has become sort of personal, right? We get whatever, and really it comes down to rights. Whatever right that we want, we become very passionate about it, and we're going to fight for that right to the death. Is basically the way that we're gonna do politics. It's a super simplistic view of politics, but that's my take on it. We're all fighting for certain rights on all sides, and we're very passionate about those rights, either for ourselves or for other people. But we're very passionate. So if we can find the unity in that, oh, I see you're very passionate about that. Why? Now you've put it in their court to say, oh, well, this topic means a lot to me because my family, or I've experienced this, and it matters to me that other people don't have to experience this. And then you're having, all of a sudden you found yourself in a conversation, right? Because then they're going to say, well, you're really passionate about that topic. Why? And that gives you the opportunity. Well, this is why I'm so passionate about X, Y, and Z. And it gives you an opportunity to probably share your faith at some point, because so much of what we believe as Christians is founded in Scripture and in our belief in Jesus Christ and the gospel message. So I think we can use those conversations knowing that we're probably not going to walk away with changed minds on either side as far as the topic goes. I mean, it's possible. It's not unheard of. But what we could do is find changed minds in a sense that I can actually get along with somebody who believes the exact opposite as I do. Or maybe it's they're not the kind of person I thought they would be by believing in that or thinking that way. Now I understand what might be the perspective of a person who holds that view. And so it really breaks down barriers. It's the art of conversation, Tyson. It really does come down to that, is we just have lost the ability to disagree well. We just can't do it. If you don't agree with me, now I'm going to cancel you, or I'm going to say, we're done. No more friendship. We're done. And it shouldn't be that way. It used to be when I was growing up, even, that I was told, the best friends are the ones that you've sort of had fights with, which is maybe why siblings tend to get along when they're older, is because they fight I'm an only child, so I can't really speak for experience on that. But, they fight a lot as children, and as adults, they get along. But in friendship, sometimes, maybe this is only a girl thing, but you have like a big fight and then, oh, okay, we're good now. And it's sort of the same idea, is that we can admit when we disagree. We just have to be willing to see past those differences, because you probably have more in common with a person than you do disagree with. So if that makes sense, if you can find what's in common more than just focusing on that one or two things that you disagree about, I think your life will be a lot better for it.
Great advice. All right, keep that in mind.
Maybe, wait, I just had an idea. Maybe, you know how they have Super Bowl parties? We could have like presidential election watch parties and invite the whole neighborhood. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because Super Bowl parties, not everybody agrees, right? They don't all agree with each other on who should win. So maybe that's a situation where we could start to throw parties every 4 years together, and we can look forward to the presidential election rather than not.
Oh man, Yeah, in some neighborhoods, you might have to have security guards at a party like that. But yeah, that would be great if we could get back to a point where, we could all be together on that page. So great advice. Yeah, I was going to say I got invited several years back into this Facebook group, this private Facebook group that's largely about politics. And I didn't know anybody in the group except this one person who invited me, and I guess they appreciated the takes that I have on some things, and so they were like, "Yeah, you should join this group." And come to find out, it's like 90%, not my ideology. And so I'm like commenting and I'm like reading some of the pushback and very getting the feeling that I'm like the devil in the church or something, like very out of place. But I enjoy being one of the few people of my persuasion, as well as being one of the few Christians in that group. And every Easter, I enjoy like posting something like, "Hey guys, just wanted to remind you Jesus is actually alive. He rose from the dead," and that'll spark a conversation. So yeah,
it's not impossible, right? Like one of the examples I give in my book is two Supreme Court justices, Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They were best friends by all accounts. They were like BFFs, each other's ride or die besides their spouses. And they got along so well outside of the court because they were opposite ideologically. They fiercely disagreed with one another when it came down to the issues. But when it came down to life, they lived it fully, and they had double dates with their spouses and them going to opera and listening to great music, and then going out to eat. They were foodies. They loved food and wine. And so this idea of like, we found these commonalities even though we're very, very different, and on paper it shouldn't work, but I'm willing to look past the things that you believe. Are you willing to look past those things of me so that we can actually have a rich friendship? And they, by their accounts, they've written, and they're now both they both passed away, but they've written about each other and spoken about each other, that they made each other better justices because they were able to talk about those issues and make a better impact in the opinions that they wrote. So I want people to be encouraged that this isn't something that I'm just making up and good luck. It can really, really happen, and does happen on a day-to-day basis. Maybe not what you see on social media, but definitely in real life.
For sure. Great point. I love that you included that about Ginsburg and Scalia, two giants of the Supreme Court. So yeah, great stuff. At the end of your book, you very interestingly include this appendix on building bridges specifically to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was just fascinated by that because it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. It was just this one appendix about that specifically. So I was like, out of all of the groups that you could build bridges with or add an appendix about, you chose Jehovah's Witnesses. So I just wanted to ask you real quick, why did you add that appendix about Jehovah's Witnesses specifically?
Yeah, so I started the World Religion series at Mama Bear with Christianity. I did a series about Christianity, and then I did Judaism, and then I did Jehovah's Witnesses. And through Women in Apologetics, I met a former Jehovah's Witness who I've gotten to know. We are now friends, and talked to her a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses. And obviously, if I've experienced missionaries at my door, right, and wanting to be able to communicate with them. And the series that I wrote about the JWs on the Mama Bear page led to my being asked to contribute a chapter to Harvest House Popular Handbook on World Religions, which was the general editor is Daniel McCoy. And so I wrote a chapter about the Jehovah's Witnesses and really spent a lot of time learning about their faith. and their worldview. I attended one of their Good Friday services that they have, that everybody's invited. Many people go to that particular event every year, and have spoken to some current Jehovah's Witnesses as well. For me, it seemed like a good idea, and you can tell me if it wasn't, to include an appendix that showed how this would be lived out practically, in a sense that, okay, you get some missionaries at your doorstep on a Saturday morning. How are you going to build a bridge? How are you going to begin a relationship with them? I most recently with Jehovah's Witnesses had a pen pal, and that was during the pandemic when we were all quarantined. They were quarantined too, so they couldn't go door to door anymore. So they started writing letters, and I actually wrote back quite frequently with somebody who mailed me a letter, and we went back, I mean, maybe for a full year on letters, and it was just asking questions and getting her response, and then I would respond and ask more questions, and it was really lovely. But Jehovah's Witnesses have always had sort of because they are so present in our neighborhoods, it seemed like the right place to go when I was trying to show the readers how this would work practically. And I mean, I think it works. But like I said, I'm open to you telling me that I shouldn't have included that as well.
Well, I mean, you kept the conversation going with the Jehovah's Witness for about a year, it sounds like. So, I mean, clearly, you weren't shutting down the conversation. You weren't saying things to, scare them away or anything. And I'm sure, given your background in apologetics, you were giving them some food to chew on. So, yeah, I do. It was just interesting to me that you specifically chose Jehovah's Witnesses, but now that you've given the background, it makes a lot more sense, right? You've already done research on that. You've had experiences with them. So of course you're going to apply the bridge building techniques to that particular circumstance.
Yeah, I mean,
so
the dream would be to write like a follow-up book, right? Where we can have that kind of appendix become a chapter where we can talk about the different worldviews and different religions, and how can we have conversations with people from those worldviews. What is that going to look like? And it would pattern.
I'm gonna get Harvest House on real quick. Hey, Harvest House, she's got an idea for another book. You need to go ahead and sign that.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, but I do think that would be a really great way to go. I don't know what my future writing situation will be, but it would be it's something that I've thought about.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fantastic. All right, you've got a follow-up project. Good deal. Well, let's close up this project first. So just to wrap things up, like I said, fantastic book. Congratulations. It just soared the Amazon charts. I hope everybody picks up a copy or two, because this is something that everybody can read and benefit from, no matter what your background or education level. So super excellent book. Just to condense sort of everything in a nutshell and give people a big takeaway, what do you hope our viewers and people that read this book, what's the one big takeaway that you hope people will get from your book?
Well, yeah, I think you kind of touched on it there. Anybody can do this, and we're all called to do this. We're all called to be able to give a defense for the hope within us, and to do it with gentleness and respect. So this book sort of just makes 1 Peter 3:15 come to life in our own situations. What does it look like when we get asked to share the hope within us, and can we give an answer? And how do we give an answer? This book will help you give an answer in a way that hopefully will create relationship rather than tear them down.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're going to be including a link in our description so people can pick up a copy. How else can viewers support you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me at lindseymedenwaldt.com. There is a tab there that you can, if you want me to speak at your church or organization, I am available. You can also find me at mamabearapologetics.com. And the Christian Research Journal sometimes runs some of the things I write specifically about the New Age movement and also extraterrestrials. So check it out.
Awesome. Okay, well, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us. And for you guys out there, I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Tyson.